Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of The Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 23rd of April. So coming to the first article, down to earth on the anti-satellite test. The context, as obvious, is the anti-satellite test and the mission Shakti that India did carry out on the 27th of March. So this was somehow a major development in space and space powers of India. But this issue has become a controversial one. The several articles in the past that we have discussed are delving into the aspects of this particular test and how space deterrence is of no relevance, or what is the relevance of space deterrence. All of these issues are what we have already discussed in the past. So please go and refer to those articles if you have not, to those discussions in the editorial, because those were in-depth analysis of the anti-satellite test. This article also touches upon few of those points, but I will be restricting my discussion to only newer points which I could extract from this particular discussion, because all the other points are largely a repetition of what we have already discussed. So coming to the issues which are important, the first issue is that of the neighborhood concerns vis-a-vis the anti-satellite test. Now here what has happened is that there is an analysis that has been done in this editorial that this kind of a test that India has done, where it has shown capabilities of destroying satellites in the lower Earth orbit, could result in an arms race in India's neighborhood, primarily vis-a-vis Pakistan, because India and Pakistan have for long been in an unspoken arms race. So this is what could happen in India's neighborhood. There is a threat of heightened tensions developing in the neighborhood. Also, it might happen that Pakistan might seek China's support to gain these kind of anti-satellite capabilities. So this is one impact that the anti-satellite test is going to have on India's neighborhood. This was a newer analysis. We have not discussed the impacts of anti-satellite test on the neighborhood, though we have discussed the impacts of this test globally, but not on India's neighborhood. So that is why I found this point a little new. Next is the issue of India's space program as a civilian program, and this is one of the most important analysis of this particular editorial. A direct question like this is what can come, that is India's space program a civilian program, or is India's space program shifting from a civilian program to a military program? Like this kind of a question is what can be framed by UPSC. So you should have an understanding of India's space program being largely a civilian program. Now here you should know that unlike several other countries whose space program was largely a military one, because even if you will see US and Russia, the two countries developed their space program as during the era of the Cold War. So this space program was also a military program. But this was never the case with India. India started its space program in the 1960s under the leadership of Prime Minister Nehru. And India expressed at that point of time also that its space program is largely for the interest of the people. It is a civilian program. Also, you should know that the ISRO was what was formed in the year 1969. Later, it was the Space Commission which was formed in the early 1970s. These are two major organizations vis-a-vis space developments. Also, the space leadership was under visionary leaders like Vikram Sarabhai and later under Satish Dhawan. So their space vision of these leaders is also of peaceful development of the space program for civilian purposes. So all of this is clearly reflecting that India's space program was a civilian one. Next, what you need to know under India's civilian program is the achievements that India has had vis-a-vis its space program. The first was definitely the first Indian satellite, which was launched in the year 1975, and it was called Aryabhatta. Then later in the year 1982, ISRO launched the first Indian national satellite system, the ASAT. Then the first GSLV that took off from Sriharikota in the year 2001. And then later in the year 2008, ISRO launched the Chandrayaan-1, which was India's first Indian planetary science and exploration mission to the moon. And then the most important and the most recent, which is the 2013 mission to the Mars, which is the Mars orbital mission, the Mangalyaan. So all of these are major achievements, and all of these are with an interest for civilian programs only. So all of this is what is reflecting that India's space program is largely a civilian one. This entire paragraph, which is in just reflecting the Indian space program, is somehow very, very important, because though I would agree that they do not have a mention of all the space achievements of India, but you have to understand that in the UPSC means you do not have the scope to write everything. You will have to eliminate a lot of stuff, and as a result of which this kind of an analysis where things are what are given to you in brief, important events are what are mentioned in small word limits, becomes important, because this is exactly how you have to replicate it in your answer. So that is why this is important. Next, what is important here is the cost-benefit analysis of the anti-satellite test that India has done. Definitely the benefit is that India has shown major capabilities. India has shown deterrence in space. It is a newer step in science and technology. But this also has a cost, and the cost is that of India's image, which till now was that of a peaceful and responsible nation, committed to the peaceful uses of space. But the issue is that if this kind of weaponization is what is being done by India in the space sector, then India's calls for demilitarization of the space is something that amount or sound like hypocrisy. So that is what has been analyzed, that a cost-benefit analysis has to be done, that such kind of deterrence is good but not at the stake of India's image, is what has been discussed here. So these are the 3 points which are new in this particular article. Otherwise, anti-satellite test and Mission Shakti is one of the most important topics for UPSC mains this year. So please keep that in mind. Coming to the next article, a half-written promise. Now the context here is with regards to women's health and reproductive rights. The article is largely analyzing these issues from the perspective of the coming election, but I will not be doing that. This topic in itself is also very, very important, be it the election time or not. So I will be discussing it from that perspective. Coming to the issues which are important, the first issue that has been discussed here is with regards to the maternal deaths. Now the editorial is bringing to light that India has one of the highest maternal deaths in the entire world. The figure that has been given is 45,000 deaths per year, which is almost equivalent to 1 death per 12 minutes. Now whenever you get such kind of statements or such kind of facts, this becomes important. This becomes important as opener statements for your answers. I have discussed previously also that for introduction we do not have a scope for word limit much in UPSC. So if you have a fact readily available with you, this will provide an excellent introduction as well as it will reflect your knowledge. Next, what is important here is the issue of unsafe abortions. Now this is something that is a major concern, a major problem in India, primarily because abortion in India is somehow a social taboo and a stigma, and it continues to be so. Only 22% of the abortions in India are what are done in hospitals. So this is something that is reflecting that approximately 78%, more than 75% is what you can remember. Abortions are what are done not in public and private health facilities. So this is what is a threat to the lives of the women who are undergoing such procedures. There is an issue of lack of safe clinics in the country. There's an issue of lack of public hospitals and facilities for abortions in public hospitals. The stigma that I had already mentioned is what is associated with abortions, especially if an abortion is being done by a woman who is unmarried, or for that matter is a teenager or is a young adolescent girl. In that case, the taboo associated or the attitude towards women is such that women resort to unsafe abortions, and this is what is a major cause of concern, a major health issue for women in India. Next, what has been discussed here is the issue of Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act of 1971. Under this act, an abortion is what can be done up to 20 weeks only. If abortion is to be done beyond 20 weeks, then a permission is what has to be taken from a medical board as well as the courts. So this is something that needs to be revised, is what has been discussed in the editorial, that some safeguards, some rights of women have to be upheld in this scenario also. Often this kind of a limitation is what restricts women from undergoing or availing health facilities in hospitals and adhere to unsafe abortion. So that is what has been discussed. Next, what the editorial is discussing here is the right to privacy. This was something that was called as a fundamental right. It was given the status of a fundamental right in the Puttaswamy judgment recently by the Supreme Court. And here the Supreme Court has mentioned or talked about several privacy-related issues for women. For instance, privacy according to Supreme Court includes at its core the preservation of personal intimacies, the sanctity of family life, marriage, procreation, home, as well as sexual orientation. So all of this is what is reflecting that women have a right to privacy vis-a-vis their reproductive health and their reproductive decisions, and this is what needs to be upheld. They should not be made subject to societal pressures as well as government laws vis-a-vis their choices of reproduction. So this is one important analysis. Next, what has been discussed here is the issue of debates. Now, this is a matter, the reproductive health of women as well as their rights or the reproductive rights is what is a major issue, and this is what needs to be debated. This is what needs to be debated by the political parties, by the civil society, and by all the other actors who are related in the development of the country. So this is one thing that has been discussed. The issue is somehow important, but the article largely does not touch upon the depth of major issues. Definitely these points are what I could extract, but largely the editorial is discussing about how can this be ensured through the elections and how this should be a major issue of vis-a-vis the political developments of the 2019 elections. So in that context, the article is not an an all-encompassing one, but definitely this issue is somehow important, and these facts that we could extract from this article become important for us. The importance will be for those social issues in General Studies paper 1, so that is the relevance. Coming to the next article, Sunday, Bloody Sunday. Now the context here is a very, very unfortunate event. This is with regards to the serial blasts that have taken place in Sri Lanka. These blasts have killed approximately 290 people and 500 people have been wounded. So definitely this is a ghastly attack. Some issues are what are important here. The first issue is with regards to the targets that have been chosen. Now here you need to understand that the targets have been chosen selectively. These targets have largely been 3 luxury hotels as well as some churches. So this is what is reflecting. The target has been chosen in such a manner that the impact should be large, so that a lot of foreign tourists lose their lives, and as a result of which the echo of this particular attack is what is heard globally. So this is somehow intended to shake or to create terrorism all across the globe is the entire intention of this particular blast. So that is the first issue which is important. The second issue is vis-a-vis Sri Lanka's economy, which is largely dependent on tourism. Now this attack will definitely impact tourism in Sri Lanka. This might have repercussions or ripples on Sri Lankan economy, and this is also something that is important for India, because in India also terrorism is at a height, and this is what has direct impacts on tourism, is something that you need to analyze. The impact of terrorism on tourism is a newer concept. Is something that you should bring out in your answers while you're discussing terrorism. Next, what has been discussed in the editorial is with regards to the ethnic relations in Sri Lanka, which are already tense. Now here the editorial is bringing to light the fact that there is a Muslim minority in Sri Lanka, there is also a Christian minority in Sri Lanka, and there is a majority of Sinhalese Buddhists in Sri Lanka. So what has happened is that this attack is what is being said to be done by the Muslim minority. It is believed to be an Islamist attack, and this is what is done on another minority, that is largely the Christian, because this was done in churches. It was done on the day of Easter. So this is something that has been analyzed. But what has been good in Sri Lanka is that despite the ethnic relations in Sri Lanka being tense, the government has not allowed for the translation of these attacks into ethnic unrest in the country. It has curbed that. It has prevented the spread of rumors in the country, and that is one achievement of the government in the aftermath of these particular attacks. Next, something that is important is the issue of overseas intelligence. Here an analysis is what has been made, that it is believed that in Sri Lankan government was given an intelligence feedback even from India that such kind of attacks are what are there in the pipeline, but heed has not been paid. Heed was not paid to this kind of an intelligence, and as a result of which the attacks could not be stopped. Next, something that is very, very important is that it is being believed that a small radical group could not have done such an attack of such scale. So it is being believed that they have had a support of the Islamic State. This is what is being seen as a shadow of the Islamic State, and which is a very, very major concern for the entire South Asian region, including India. We have read in previous articles that the end of Islamic State is what is being called out by experts, but still there are fears that it might resurge, and this could be one example that Islamic State is not yet completely over. So this is why this particular issue or this particular attack becomes relevant for India also, that India could also fear the resurgence of Islamic State in the South Asian region as well as in India. So this is the entire analysis of this particular topic. This is important vis-a-vis the bilateral relations. It is important for India's neighborhood. It is also important for terrorism. So that is the entire relevance here. Coming to the next article, the line of caution. Now the context here is with regard to the suspension of the cross LOC trade. This has been suspended between Jammu and Kashmir and the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Also the two posts where this kind of a suspension has been done are the Salamabad post and the Chakandabagh post are the two posts where this suspension of the LOC trade has happened in Jammu and Kashmir. Several issues are what are important here. The first issue is with regards to the concerns that have been cited. Now the government has cited some concerns. For example, the government has said that this is what results in trading of illegal weapons, narcotics, fake currency. Also, zero traffic agreement, barter arrangement that was there between India and Pakistan is what is not being upheld in these kind of trade. Also, there are third-party items that are being traded illegally, for example, the California almonds. So these are the concerns that Indian government has cited for suspending of this particular trade. This has obviously resulted in protests. The people there are protesting that they had already demanded from the government. They want a foolproof mechanism for trade. So the government should have focused on providing this foolproof mechanism rather than altogether suspending the trade, which is harming the interests of the local people there. So next is the issue of the benefits to local economies. Now definitely this trade was of huge benefit to the local economies. It was believed that a trade of the trade in the last decade in this particular region had crossed the 6,000 crore limit. So definitely this was somehow important. It had a time of 1.6 lakh days of work days is what was created by this trade. So definitely it is a huge damage to the local economies, which are already in peril in this particular region because of terrorism and tensions in this region. So in such a scenario, if government is coming up with such kind of an embargo on trade, then this is somehow again going to alienate the locals in the region, is what has been analyzed. Next, what is important is the issue of shrill election campaign. Now here the editorial is discussing that this suspension is what has been done in the backdrop of the elections, and it is in line with the shrill election campaign that is being done by several political parties, especially the ruling political party, where a mention has been done on reversing the powers that have been given to Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370. So all of these issues are what are further creating a sense of fear in the minds of the people in Jammu and Kashmir, and the actions by the government in this particular state is another cause of concern, and that is what has been discussed here. Also is the issue of the national highway. We had discussed an article on this previously. The national highway between Udhampur and Baramulla, which was one of the major lifelines of Jammu and Kashmir, has also been stopped for the movement of the troops. Now what you have to understand here is that the people there are already feeling an alienation. They are already feeling cheated by the government. In such a scenario, what is important is that the people be made to feel comfortable, and they should be made to feel the warmth of, or that matter, the presence of the government in a positive way. If these people are going to be made given the sense that they are less important than the troops, then obviously they will develop animosity towards the troops and the government, and this is not in the interest of harmony in the state, and for that matter to prevent the alienation of the youth that is taking place in Jammu and Kashmir. Even after the Pulwama attack, repeatedly in all the articles we had discussed that the problem in Jammu and Kashmir is that of alienation, and focus has to be on that, and clearly these kind of steps by the government are unacceptable, primarily because even if the government has concerns which are definitely justified, but the government has to raise its abilities to do away with these concerns rather than altogether suspending the trade or for that matter closing the highway. These are no solutions, is what you need to understand, and this is how this issue is further going to escalate, or it might fire back to the government. So that is one analysis that has been drawn in this particular editorial. The issue of Jammu and Kashmir, India-Pakistan is somehow one of the most important issues in the bilateral relations. So in that context, this article is particularly important. And with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching the video.